was longing, and it was not cured till I finally went to the department store and counted out the money in small coins before the dismayed clerk. When I came to the house, I held up the instrument before the eyes of the astonished household. Life is something like this trumpet. If you don't put anything in it, you don't get anything out. And that's the truth. Whenever I heard the song of a bird and the answering call of its mate, I could visualize the notes and scale, all built within my consciousness as a natural symphony. I've always felt that the blues deal with epic in our history, and coming from the same people that gave us the spiritual, they reflected a nominal freedom. All the blues that I've written are either historic or folklore or folk song. William Christopher Handy. W.C. Handy was the pioneer of blues. He was a marching band director of college and a teacher of mechanical and agricultural stuff at a mechanical and agricultural college. And he wrote this song, St. Louis Blues.
I hate to see that evening sun go down.
But one day he heard a blues man playing by the railroad track, and he decided to be one of America's first music folklorists. And he went on to form several bands that inspired several ragtime and marching band outfits to play his compositions, which were labeled as blues songs. This is long before the Carter family and the song catcher movement and Alan Lomax, long before that. This is a child of two Methodist ministers, and he took his gospel church roots and transformed them and transformed marching band music, transformed the ragtime elements of that, while recording African American folk music. And in this process, he preserved one of Americana's most influential, if not the most influential subgenre, Americana being the main genre, which we kind of made up in the past 30 years, but we'll delve into that later. But yeah, he had church roots, and he took this church music and added that soul element to, his music, of course, because it was already present in a lot of African American folk music that he was recording and writing the sheet music for and arranging for a band. He went to a train depot, I believe, in 1907, and he heard a slide blues guitar musician. It was just a guy sitting by the train playing slide music. Now, this is a form of music that came from Hawaiian guitar, and you got mostly church music at the time. It was kind of forbidden to be secular, and so when all these other styles came in, they would sing gospel songs using a slide blues technique, and sometimes secular music too. It's grew to be very popular when American recordings grew to be popular. Alan Lomax and the song catchers of the early 20th century are responsible for a lot of music that we would have not heard otherwise. Collecting old records, collecting field recordings of random strangers in prisons and plantations, or possibly just stopping by someone's front porch. But W.C. Handy did that with his compositions. He preserved a lot of old folk music and folklore, and he was one of the first Americana folklorists. I mean, you got a lot of like people that cover white American music, but W.C. Handy was there to preserve the black side of history, African American side of history, where you got slide blues, you got jazz, you got ragtime, and unfortunately, um, a not unfortunately the music, but the movement known as minstrelsy, which we now frown upon these days, but it really was an ode to African and Appalachian folk music, just kind of a melting pot of Americana music in those shows. The depictions of African Americans were very racist. The folk tales were loosely based off of African culture, but really bastardized to kind of sort of uh, demean a whole culture and race, and it's not good. It wasn't good. It went on to cause lots of struggles in general. I mean, that struggle was already there post-slavery. A lot of enslavement of black men still happened in prisons when unfair um, arrests would be made, and then you get sent to a penitentiary where you have to work in a work camp or a place that is known quintessentially in the Americana world as Parchman Farm. It's in the movie Oh Brother Where Art Thou, which I'm probably going to do a whole episode on that movie, just so you know, as well as Songcatcher, and who knows. We're just going to do it all. But this first episode is about W.C. Handy and blues and the surrounding genres. We have American folk music at its finest here, and gospel, rural blues, Delta blues, and later on electric blues, which generated rock and roll, and psychedelic rock, and metal, and punk even, believe it or not. So that concludes this little snippet about W.C. Handy. I will be delving into him a lot as we go through blues, and next I want to talk about folk music. I want to cover Alan Lomax, Lead Belly, Woody Guthrie, all this stuff you probably already know, but maybe add some stuff you don't know about those three guys. And if anything, we can all get together again and sit around the fire and listen to some good Americana music.
Hello, conductor, what's the matter with the line? I wanna talk, yeah, I got a mind. Tell me how long will I have to wait? Or will you tell me now? Or will I have to hesitate?
Between 1850 and 1950, America underwent radical change. We can start with Hawaii in the 1920s and before. It was a Polynesian empire up until 1898, when the rise of nationalism and the aftermath of the Spanish-American War led the U.S. to annexing several territories, leading for non-native businessmen and native Hawaiians to fight over control of the government. With that political turmoil that America caused Hawaii came an exchange of cultures, especially between southeastern U.S. musicians and Hawaiian guitarists and ukulele players. I was never so taken aback in my life. I was always afraid of things that worked the first time. Thomas A. Edison, on hearing his voice play back to him from his first tinfoil phonograph. Between 1877 and the turn of the 20th century, the ability to record onto Edison cylinders gave rise to shellac discs, which by 1900 to 1926 were recorded between 78 to 80 rotations per minute, later standardized to 78 RPM records, which were the main medium up until 1959 of releasing two songs, one on side A and one on side B, usually around 3 minutes each. In 1960s, these discs were changed from shellac to vinyl. Shellac, being made out of beetles, was more fragile, more glass-like, and heavy to carry, whereas vinyl was more durable, less fragile, and lighter to carry, with less rotations per minute and higher capacity, fitting which is called an album. Originally a book of 78 RPM songs onto one disc at 33 and a third rotations per minute, with around 12 songs total. Many recordings flourished with 78 RPM recording companies between that period of time of 1900 and 1959, and recording companies rose up to the highest they ever probably gotten as far as like real value before and after the Great Depression, covering all genres from classical to folk to blues, jazz, and in its later days, rock and roll and country. Between 1844 and 1864, American composer Stephen Foster composed classics like Oh Susanna, Camptown Races, and Hard Times Come Again No More, inspiring many folk and popular music genres that succeeded the era of the Civil War and Romantic period of music. His parlor and folk songs have been immortalized in Looney Tunes, they were sang in minstrel shows, they were covered by folk revivals of the 1930s and later in the 60s during the most famous folk revival movement. After the era of Stephen Foster came the era of the post-Civil War Reformation, so-called Reformation, when black musicians like Scott Joplin was pioneering ragtime and W.C. Handy was pioneering blues. Scott Joplin composed the two most famous ragtime hits, The Entertainer and Maple Leaf Rag, published in 1902 and 1899 respectively. He pioneered the genre with a mixture of Texarkana music from his home, classical compositions, gospel, work songs, and blues from its very early stages. Meanwhile, as early as the 1490s, the Caribbean has been invaded and conquered by European colonizers who established the Bahamas as a British colony in 1717, where this song, sung here by the Phoenix Singers, takes place in the time of 1929 following the story of a devastating hurricane. The Caribbean as a whole has been more of a melting pot than America of African, indigenous, European, and Latin American genres like salsa, reggae, hip-hop, and jazz. Gospel had a huge comeback in the 1920s when recordings started to flourish. Prohibition began around a huge evangelical movement which fought against school teachings of evolution, but also fought for women's suffrage, which had ties to the religious and anti-alcohol movement. The religious side continued on even after the end of Prohibition in 1933, when the Great Depression devastated America along with a great flood in the South, a Dust Bowl in the Midwest and South, the rise of fascism internationally, and labor laws and progressive movements began to form under the First and Second New Deal between 1933 and 1938 by the Franklin Delano Roosevelt administration. In these religious recordings, we can really get a grasp of pre-recording era religious music, because a lot of it was passed down orally by the church and culturally through the family. But this little brief history here is to sort of wrap things up before we start talking about the song catchers. And song catchers really were a big part of the recording industry, allowing for some of the most unknown names. They are still unknown today, but it's kind of difficult because, a name like Tommy Johnson, for example, we hear it in the movie Oh Brother Where Art Thou. We hear it when we talk about Robert Johnson, the more famous blues man of the Delta blues era. But people like him were able to record their stuff because of song catchers, which we will get into next. Huddy William Ledbetter was an American musician. In between 1915 and 1939, he served several prison and jail terms in Louisiana. He had several charges against him, one of them being murder, and he was sentenced to 30 years. He did get pardoned by a governor in 1925, and then later on was discovered in the Angola Penitentiary by folklorists John Lomax and Alan Lomax. And as they were traveling the South as a project to preserve traditional music for the Library of Congress, they found Huddy William Ledbetter, who was known later in life as Lead Belly. And they recorded him singing the song Goodnight Irene, along with a song called Governor O.K. Allen, and it was a petition to get him released after almost serving all of his minimum sentence. And the Lomaxes took that record and successfully got him freed from prison. And, it did have everything to do with his singing, but they later wrote to the Lomaxes that it didn't have to do with the singing. Rambling round your city, rambling round your town, I never see a friend I know, long as I ramble around. In 1939, Alan Lomax dropped out of college to get Lead Belly out of prison again. He was quite a troublemaker. And him and his father, John Lomax, had quarrels with Lead Belly and his then wife, Martha. And it was mostly over the money they gave him going towards his drinking habit. But in 1939, Lead Belly performed with a lot of big names like Pete Seeger, the Weavers, Brownie McGee, Sonny Terry, who you hear playing harmonica earlier in Goodnight Irene. But also a notable name, Woody Guthrie, who wrote the Ramblin' Round version of Goodnight Irene. As the Lomaxes continued their southern journey, they would have Lead Belly travel with them, and he would record the bulk of the songs they collected. And he would learn from people that they found in towns all over the South and various places of the Midwest as well, I believe. And a lot of times, the song catchers, the likes of Alan Lomax, he would have Lead Belly record these songs and basically sell records to, I guess, sort of fund his project of field recordings, where you get a lot of prison recordings, home recordings, just traveling around catching songs. We're going to get more into that, how the Carter family did it, how Jimmy Rogers did it, and Lead Belly was involved. And later on, the likes of Woody Guthrie, he was profoundly moved by Lead Belly's records, as well as Sonny Terry and Brownie McGee. They were all performers together in New York City in 1939. A lot of times we associate all those guys together because of Bob Dylan in the 1960s, who covered them a lot and basically adopted their styles during his folk era. Bob Dylan was also, directly references them in the song called Song to Woody on his first album. But yeah, I would urge you to go out and find anything recorded by Alan Lomax. Find many artists that way. You'll also find a lot if you look through the Harry Smith anthology. There's more folklorists than just Alan Lomax and his father, John Lomax. And there's more folk singers than Lead Belly and Woody Guthrie. And we will delve into folk music of America, white and black, and all cultures inside of America. And I think that to get these guys sort of briefed and brought up is good, because as we mentioned in an earlier segment about W.C. Handy, it's kind of good to preserve history and culture, whether you're composing like W.C. Handy and adopting melodies, or if you're petitioning to the governor to get released from jail for murder. You can sing songs you learned in prison, songs such as The Midnight Special, House of the Rising Sun, which you'll hear me playing Lead Belly's version in this video. I learned it from my guitar teacher, who taught me a lot about blues and folk and Americana picking. And yeah, I think we can cut it off there. Like I said, go check out anything Alan Lomax, Smithsonian, Harry Smith anthology, anything Mo Ash has recorded. If you like folk music, you'll find a lot of folk music in those recordings. You'll also find country blues, country gospel, and many other genres. The Lomaxes probably have the biggest collection, and they're about to, most of them are in the public domain, but they're about to really do a big database release, I think, on the internet. I need to check more into that, but yeah, enjoy this next little bit here. It's just the instrumental I came up with. It doesn't have a name.
the moonlight on Honolulu Bay. And all the beaches are full of beaches who bring their youth along. And in the glimmer of the moonlight, they love to sing this song. If you like a ukulele lady like you. If you like to linger where it's shady, ukulele lady linger too. If you kiss a ukulele lady, why do you promise ever to be true? And she see another ukulele lady fool around with you.
So we're gonna start off here with a little bit of Eastern European jazz, which is this particular song is a cover of an early jazz standard written in 1928, and it was not uncommon to hear a band cover it. It was the 24th most covered song between 1898 and 1935. Don't ask me how I know that. But it's best not to delve too much into this podcast if you think genres are a definite way to distinguish all the styles that come from various forms of classical and folk, which influence each other quite a bit. It's best not to pigeonhole the Memphis Jug Band as just jug band music. It is a definite sound, but has been used to describe the early 20th century fusions of rural blues, jazz, and folk and artists, even without a jug and washboard. Piedmont blues has been given several definitions, along with Delta blues, ragtime blues, country blues, but they all fall under the category of rural blues. And some artists seem to fall under all these categories of rural blues, like Mississippi John Hurt, or Reverend Gary Davis, or Skip James. Blues has swung long before swing. Classical has played 12-bar blues long before blues. And folk has done it all, including the complexities of jazz arrangements of time signatures, key signatures, changing chord progressions, and atonal and semitone usage, and all kinds of various mathematical manipulations of sound that we just tend to love to hear with our ears. So we can't really rely on genre as a key to using, even with real attributes of all genres and subgenres. So I hope you take heed when you hear W.C. Handy and it may sound like jazz, but it's not. Or when you hear Louis Armstrong or Jelly Roll Morton and you call it blues. It's not. You're not wrong, but for purposes of the popular consensus, which we will try to stick to, W.C. Handy is primordial blues mixed with ragtime and marching band. Early Louis Armstrong and Jelly Roll Morton is late stage ragtime blues on brass. It incorporates elements of folk and sometimes throws classical sounds in, especially when you'll see later in this video, which we're going to do a lot of listening on this segment. This genre of Louis Armstrong and Jelly Roll Morton, Dixieland Jazz Band, early Duke Ellington, is referred to generally as hot jazz because it's hot off the skillet, as it had just been popularized by many acts at the time. I highly recommend you seek 2 documentaries out. There's one documentary called Jazz by Ken Burns, and there's another documentary called Martin Scorsese Presents the Blues. They are each several hours long and go fully into depth into both genres. Each, like the jazz goes a little bit into blues and minstrelsies. The blues documentary goes into jazz a lot because they intersect quite a bit in their history because they came from the same people. For the purposes of this segment, we're going to compare a lot of different songs and listen. But as far as Europe and its history of quickly adopting American sounds such as blues and jazz and hillbilly music, from folk to rock and roll, we're only going to cover today that period when records started being made, when jazz standard reflected the folk and parlor tradition, creating a sound that has impacted the very music you hear today, known as pop music. In Eastern Europe, we have a more minor key swing, melodic, being formed as early as the mid 1930s, while Duke Ellington and Louis Armstrong were rising to the top with big brass bands. Django Reinhardt, as we heard in the beginning of this video, he stuck to a minimal string band. In Texas, you had Bob Wills creating a western swing band with strings and brass. But in places like Washington, D.C. and New Orleans, there were brass bands. So they were exchanging records transatlantically, and while Eastern Europe had its roots, with Chopin, he's got March Funèbre. It's a piano sonata that we know as the Funeral March, very similar to the Imperial March in Star Wars. But it's very common to hear a reference audibly of that song because it's been historically associated with death. Looney Tunes and many cartoons had the Funeral March played when a character dies and comes back to life later, like when Sylvester gets murdered or when Tom and Jerry murder each other. It's very common. We had that morbid sense of humor and early minstrel influence comedy. Mad TV and is the most modern example of that. But I'm sure there's more modern examples that I just haven't been exposed to, but that's my most modern example. But anyways, as you hear at the end of Black and Tan Fantasy, there's that reference to Chopin's March Funèbre. And it's funny that they concluded that resolution of a jazz song in the minor swing, early swing, in brass form, and with a verse of a classical piano sonata. And it's kind of neat. It happens a lot in music where a symphony or a jazz piece references another song. We hear it in Dvorak's New World Symphony when he references Turkey in the Straw. I would pull that up, but that symphony is very long, and Turkey in the Straw has some problematic histories that I'd already covered and don't feel like delving more into. So, today, let's enjoy this 12 minutes of listening, apart from this commentary, and I hope you can see the connections that there is no chicken and egg scenario. Europe does not necessarily create jazz, but jazz wouldn't necessarily be the same without it, and vice versa. Europe would not have the same kind of music today without African American influence. It was a big exchange that could arguably be more, impactful than the Greco-Egyptian exchange or any famous exchange of cultures. America and Europe have long coexisted. So between Chopin and Duke Ellington, or between Django Reinhardt and, an American composer of jazz standards, or Bob Wills and Fats Waller, which we'll bring those two up when we talk about Highway 61, the Gulf of Mexico, Chicago, Memphis, and other places along that middle part of America. We'll go from Cajuns to Chicago blues. That's the standard I'm setting for the next segment of the next episode. And we're concluding this first episode with a lot of listening. So, enjoy.
the state of Carolina. If there's and you know her, sure to me, Dinah, with those Dixie eyes blazing. How I long to sit and gaze into the eyes of Dinah Lee. Every night, why do I shake with pride? Because my dynamite changed her mind about me. Oh, Dinah, since you wanted to China, I would hop an ocean liner just to be with Dinah Lee. Swinging on out to Jackson. Yes, yes. Yes, yes, yes. Bye, 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 bye.
Oh, Dinah.
Is there anyone finer in the state of Carolina? If there isn't, you know her. Show her to me, old Dinah. With your Dixie eyes blazing, how I'd love to sit and gazing to the eyes of Dinah Lee. Every night, why do I shake with pride? Because my dynamite changed your mind about me. Dinah, if you wanted to China, I would hop an ocean liner just to be with Dinah Lee.
Now, Kelso.